Chapter 1. The Legend Begins. There are few names that echo as loudly through the Caribbean as that of Captain Jack Sparrow. His reputation, built on a mixture of cunning, charm, and sheer luck, has made him a legend among pirates, sailors, and treasure hunters alike. But where did it all begin? Who was Jack Sparrow before he became the unpredictable, swashbuckling pirate we know today? Jack's tale didn't start in the high seas or aboard a grand ship like the Black Pearl. It began on a small island in the Caribbean, where a young boy grew up surrounded by pirates, but never quite fitting in. Born to a pirate captain, Captain Edward Teague, Jack Sparrow was immersed in a world of danger, treasure maps, and daring escapades. However, his father was a far more traditional pirate, honorable by the codes of the seas, while young Jack's mind was always filled with dreams of freedom and unconventional ways of living. As a child, Jack was not like the other pirates. While they reveled in gold and glory, he was drawn to the chaos of the sea itself, the unpredictable tides, the uncharted waters, the thrill of survival. His father, seeing his son's restlessness, would often take him on voyages, hoping to teach him the ways of the pirate. But Jack's free spirit was never fully contained, and he quickly realized that the pirate world wasn't as straightforward as his father would have liked. Jack's first major adventure came at the age of 15 when he stowed away aboard a pirate ship, determined to make a name for himself. It was aboard this ship, the Wicked Wench, that Jack first tasted the freedom of the pirate's life, the thrill of the chase, the camaraderie among rogues, and the promises of treasure. But it was also here that he learned the harsh realities of piracy, the cutthroat nature of loyalty, the danger of betrayal, and the harsh code of the sea. After a disastrous encounter with the British Navy, Jack was marooned on a small, desolate island. His captors, thinking they had rid themselves of the troublesome pirate, left him to die. But Jack was no ordinary man. With nothing but his wits and a flair for the dramatic, he managed to escape, securing the Wicked Wench as his first vessel. From that moment on, Jack Sparrow's name would be forever intertwined with the Black Pearl, the ship that would come to define his legend. Though the events surrounding the early days of Jack Sparrow are shrouded in mystery, one thing is clear: he was destined to become more than just a pirate. He was meant to be a force of nature, an unpredictable, uncontrollable entity who would carve his own path through the annals of history. And so, the legend of Captain Jack Sparrow was born, and the seas would never be the same again. Chapter 2. The Road to the Black Pearl. After narrowly escaping death on the island of the Wicked Wench, Jack Sparrow didn't just survive, he thrived. His escape marked the beginning of a journey that would lead him to one of the most infamous ships in pirate history, the Black Pearl. But the road to becoming captain of the Pearl was anything but smooth. The first step in Jack's rise was his alliance with some of the Caribbean's most notorious pirates. He learned quickly that in the pirate world, having the right allies, and the ability to manipulate them, was just as important as the ability to outfight or outthink your enemies. Jack's charm, wit, and knack for getting himself out of sticky situations became his most valuable assets. In those early years after his escape, Jack sailed aboard various ships, each offering him a new set of challenges. He made alliances with pirates like the mysterious and dangerous Captain Barbossa, a man whose own ambitions would soon rival Jack's. Despite their differences, Jack and Barbossa formed a temporary partnership, with Jack earning a reputation as a pirate who always seemed to escape death, no matter how tight the situation. During this time, Jack also found himself in the presence of treasure hunters and adventurers who sought the same elusive riches he was after. He crossed paths with cursed treasure maps, and even rival pirate fleets. But while most pirates were focused on amassing gold, Jack's true goal was always the freedom of the open seas. Gold was just a means to an end. But it was during a daring raid on a Spanish galleon that Jack's fate would truly begin to shift. It was here that Jack first set eyes on the Black Pearl. At the time, the Pearl was no more than a ghost ship, a vessel with a terrifying reputation, said to be crewed by the dead and cursed by dark magic. Most sailors avoided it, too frightened to even speak its name. But Jack, ever the opportunist, saw the Black Pearl not as a cursed ship but as the key to something much greater. In a move that surprised even his closest allies, Jack Sparrow seized the chance to take control of the Pearl. Through a combination of luck, deception, and sheer audacity, he tricked the crew into thinking he was their new captain, convincing them to embrace his unique style of leadership, one based not on strict rules but on the freedom of the sea. Jack's charm and unorthodox methods earned him the loyalty of the crew, and with it, control of the Black Pearl. Now in possession of the Black Pearl, Jack set sail on his most ambitious adventure yet. The legendary ship, with its black sails and cursed history, became his home, his sanctuary, and his symbol of rebellion. The world of piracy would never be the same. And for Jack Sparrow, the Black Pearl was no longer just a ship, it was the gateway to his destiny. But with this newfound power came new challenges. The Black Pearl was not without its enemies, and its history of curses and betrayal would soon come back to haunt Jack. Most notably, Captain Barbossa, who felt betrayed by Jack's sudden rise to power, would stop at nothing to reclaim the pearl for himself. And so, with a ship that no one else dared to sail, Jack's true journey was about to begin, one that would lead him to face curses, rival pirates, and even death itself. The Black Pearl was now his to command, but whether he could truly control it was yet to be seen. Chapter 3: The Curse of the Black Pearl. Jack Sparrow had claimed the Black Pearl, but with it came a weighty burden, one that he had not anticipated. For the Black Pearl was no ordinary pirate ship. It was a cursed ship, bound to the supernatural forces that governed the seas. And Jack's triumph would soon become a curse in its own right. The Black Pearl had once been captained by the ruthless Captain Hector Barbossa, a man whose ambitions knew no bounds. Under his leadership, the crew had discovered the legendary treasure of Cortez, a collection of cursed Aztec gold that would seal their fates. The treasure, however, came with a terrible price. Those who took the gold would become immortal, but trapped in a state of undeath. They would live forever, but their bodies would slowly decay, leaving them as skeletal husks, unable to feel pleasure or pain. When Jack first came aboard the Black Pearl as its captain, he was unaware of the full extent of the curse. At the time, he was only interested in sailing the seas freely and searching for treasure. But as fate would have it, he stumbled upon the cursed gold, and in doing so, unknowingly set the curse in motion. In a fateful twist, Jack became the target of the cursed crew, who sought to reclaim the treasure and break their eternal punishment. Barbossa, who had once been Jack's trusted first mate, betrayed him, casting him off the ship and leaving him stranded on a deserted island. But Barbossa's betrayal would be the spark that set off a chain of events, one that would see Jack reclaim his ship and his revenge. Years later, Jack found himself in a precarious position. Barbossa's crew was no longer just a band of pirates. They were creatures of the night, cursed to roam the seas in skeletal form until the treasure was returned. With no other option, Jack was forced to ally himself with the very men who once sought his destruction. He knew the only way to break the curse was to return the stolen gold, but doing so would come at a great cost. As the Black Pearl set sail on a mission to recover the cursed treasure, Jack's path collided with that of Will Turner, a young blacksmith with ties to the pirate world. Will's father, the legendary pirate Bootstrap Bill Turner, had been part of the cursed crew, and Will's desire to free his father from the curse would drive the events of the coming adventure. Along with Elizabeth Swan, the governor's daughter who held a secret connection to the treasure, the three of them would join forces to confront Barbossa and end the curse once and for all. Jack's interactions with Elizabeth and Will were as unpredictable as his own nature. While he may have seemed like a man driven only by his own self-interest, Jack's complex character began to shine through. Despite his chaotic approach to life and piracy, he showed moments of loyalty to those he cared for, even if that loyalty came in unexpected ways. As the final confrontation with Barbossa loomed, Jack's cunning and resourcefulness would once again prove to be his greatest weapons. But the curse of the Black Pearl was not something that could be easily undone. It would take more than just a battle for treasure. It would take a sacrifice of the highest order. As the Black Pearl sailed toward its final confrontation, Jack was faced with a choice. Would he continue his reckless pursuit of freedom, or would he find a way to end the curse and free the souls of the men aboard his ship? The Black Pearl was no longer just a ship to Jack. It had become a symbol of the curse he carried with him, a curse that haunted him no matter how many times he tried to escape it. But in the end, it was a journey that would change Jack Sparrow forever, for there was no escaping the consequences of meddling with things beyond the mortal realm. Chapter 4: A Pirate's Code. To most outsiders, pirates were little more than lawless criminals, raiders of the high seas who lived by no rules except their own. But Jack Sparrow knew better. In the unpredictable world of piracy, there was one thing that held the scattered pirate crews together: the Pirate's Code. The Pirate's Code was a set of rules, a loosely enforced guideline, meant to govern pirate behavior. It dictated everything from how treasure was divided to what to do with a mutinous crew member. But in reality, the code was more of a suggestion than a law. Pirates adhered to it when it suited them, and broke it whenever they saw fit. And Jack Sparrow, being the unpredictable force that he was more than happy to play with the rules, bending them to suit his own desires. The most famous of these rules was that treasure was to be divided fairly among the crew, with the captain receiving the largest share. But Jack, being no ordinary pirate, did not view treasure the same way others did. While most pirates saw gold as a means to power and luxury, Jack saw it as a tool for his true goal: freedom. He wasn't interested in amassing a fortune to sit on. He was after the open sea, unencumbered by the shackles of land or society. Jack's disregard for the code became apparent when he took command of the Black Pearl. Under Captain Barbossa, the ship followed the code to the letter, at least in theory. But once Jack was in charge, things quickly changed. Instead of demanding absolute obedience, Jack led with a mix of charm, trickery, and a strange form of respect for the individuality of his crew. It was clear, Jack's leadership style was rooted in the belief that the pirate life should be about freedom, not rigid rules. One of Jack's most famous moments in regard to the code came when he found himself at odds with his former first mate, Hector Barbossa. Barbossa, who saw the code as sacred and unbreakable, couldn't fathom Jack's lack of respect for it. He believed that the only way to ensure loyalty among the crew was through strict adherence to the rules. Jack, on the other hand, knew that loyalty couldn't be forced, it had to be earned. And the way to earn it, in Jack's mind, was by offering his crew the freedom to choose, to follow him because they wanted to, not because they had to. Jack's approach was evident in the way he dealt with mutiny. Where most captains would deal swiftly and ruthlessly with a mutinous crew member, Jack handled it with a mix of humor, cunning, and a bit of self-interest. When the Black Pearl was once again under Barbossa's command, Jack took advantage of his former first mate's obsession with the code to manipulate him. He didn't confront Barbossa directly, nor did he attempt to overpower him. Instead, Jack used his understanding of the pirate world to outwit Barbossa, turning the crew's loyalty against him. It was in these moments that Jack's true genius as a pirate came to light. He understood the one thing that separated a true pirate from a May sailor: the ability to adapt and survive, to bend the rules in a way that kept him one step ahead. While Barbossa's devotion to the code might have bound him, Jack's ability to think outside of it made him the more dangerous pirate. But despite his loose interpretation of the code, Jack was not entirely without morals. Beneath his chaotic, self-serving exterior, there was a code of his own, a personal sense of right and wrong that guided his actions. He may have been a pirate, but Jack was not above helping those in need, if it suited him, or if the price was right. His own brand of honor, though unconventional, was something that kept his crew and allies, like Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann, coming back to him time and again. For Jack, the pirate's code was not about rigid rules, but about balance. It was a balance between the freedom of the seas and the occasional necessity of loyalty. It was a dance between chaos and order, with Jack often taking the lead. And as long as Jack Sparrow sailed the seas, that dance would never end. Chapter 5: Conquests and the High Seas. Once Jack Sparrow claimed the Black Pearl, the open sea became both his playground and his battleground. The Black Pearl, now a symbol of freedom and defiance, sailed with a crew that followed Jack not out of fear, but because they recognized that his wild, unpredictable nature was what made him a true pirate. But the seas, as always, were filled with peril, and Jack's adventures would take him from one conquest to the next, each more dangerous than the last. The first major test of Jack's reign came when he crossed paths with the East India Trading Company, a powerful and ruthless faction that controlled the Caribbean's trade routes. The company sought to rid the seas of piracy, and they had a particular interest in Jack Sparrow, seeing him as the most notorious and unpredictable of all pirates. For Jack, the East India Trading Company was an obstacle that needed to be dealt with. Their oppressive nature went against everything he stood for: the freedom of the seas and the chaos of the pirate life. In his usual fashion, Jack did not confront the company directly with brute force. Instead, he outsmarted them, employing his skill for deception and negotiation. He knew that the key to survival was not just power, but the ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. With a series of cunning moves, Jack managed to stay one step ahead of the company, even securing temporary alliances with other pirate crews and dubious characters who shared his dislike of the company's rule. One of the most notable of these alliances was with the infamous pirate Blackbeard, a man whose name was synonymous with fear and death on the high seas. Blackbeard, notorious for his savage tactics and legendary ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, saw Jack as a potential ally, or, more likely, a tool to further his own conquests. Jack, ever the opportunist, knew that working with Blackbeard was a necessary evil, as it allowed him to protect the Black Pearl and keep the East India Trading Company at bay. But Jack was never one to fully trust anyone, least of all Blackbeard. Their partnership was fraught with tension, as both men had a hunger for power and a deep understanding of the other's desire to control the seas. Blackbeard, a pirate captain of unmatched ruthlessness, saw Jack's casual attitude toward leadership as a weakness, while Jack saw Blackbeard's brutality as a liability. Their uneasy alliance came to an explosive end when Jack's ability to manipulate situations came to the forefront once more, leaving Blackbeard defeated and Jack one step closer to his ultimate goal, unchallenged freedom on the high seas. The Black Pearl's most dangerous conquest, however, was yet to come. After narrowly escaping a deadly confrontation with the East India Trading Company, Jack found himself embroiled in a search for the Fountain of Youth, a legendary treasure that promised eternal life. The quest was not only a race against time, but also a battle against rivals who would stop at nothing to claim the fountain's secrets for themselves. Along the way, Jack crossed paths with Angelica, a woman from his past who was as much of a trickster and opportunist as he was. Together, they would face dangerous foes, treacherous waters, and the enigmatic Spanish forces who also sought the fountain. Throughout the journey, Jack's true nature as a pirate was revealed. He was not just a scavenger of treasure, but a man driven by the idea of freedom from the tyranny of the East India Trading Company, from the constraints of mortality, and from the predictability of life. In his mind, the Fountain of Youth was not a gift of eternal life, but the key to an existence untethered by time. And yet, even in his quest for immortality, Jack remained true to his chaotic sense of morality. He would betray an ally for his own survival, but he also showed moments of kindness and loyalty when the stakes were high. As the Black Pearl navigated the perilous waters of the fountain's location, Jack's crew was forced to confront their own desires for immortality. It was clear that Jack's adventures were never just about treasure. They were about the freedom that treasure represented, and the lengths he was willing to go to in order to preserve that freedom. By the time Jack had secured the fountain's secrets, the Black Pearl had become something more than a ship. It was an extension of Jack's very soul, a vessel that carried him through the highs and lows of pirate life, and a symbol of his refusal to be bound by anything, not rules, not society, and certainly not death. Chapter 6: Pirate Brotherhood. In the world of pirates, the notion of loyalty and camaraderie is as unpredictable as the winds on the high seas. It's a brotherhood bound not by blood but by a shared love for freedom, adventure, and the open ocean. And while Jack Sparrow was always more of a lone wolf than a traditional leader, the relationships he formed with other pirates were integral to his survival and success. Though often fleeting, these alliances were a reminder that even in the chaotic world of piracy, bonds were sometimes forged in the most unlikely of ways. Jack's view of brotherhood was unconventional, to say the least. While others believed that the pirate code was an essential pillar of their way of life, Jack saw it more as a guideline for when it was convenient. For Jack, loyalty wasn't a matter of adherence to rigid rules. It was about trust, mutual respect, and the understanding that each pirate, like him, had their own version of freedom to pursue. The Black Pearl's crew embodied this very spirit, a ragtag group of outcasts, misfits, and mercenaries bound together by the pursuit of the pirate's greatest treasure, autonomy. One of the most significant relationships in Jack's life was his complicated bond with Hector Barbossa. The two had once been allies, though their differing views on leadership and piracy eventually led to betrayal. Barbossa had been Jack's first mate, a position that put him in close contact with Jack's ambitions, but their partnership crumbled when Barbossa attempted a mutiny to seize control of the Black Pearl for himself. This betrayal led to Jack being marooned on a desolate island, his fate tied to the Black Pearl's cursed crew. Yet, despite the animosity between them, Barbossa was still, in Jack's mind, part of the Brotherhood of Pirates. Their rivalry was one born of necessity, fueled by ambition and a thirst for power. But deep down, Jack knew that no one understood piracy quite like Barbossa did. It was a rivalry that would come full circle when Jack, in his characteristic style, used his wit and cunning to outmaneuver Barbossa and reclaim the Black Pearl. But the Pirate Brotherhood was not limited to the most well-known names in piracy. It was the smaller, everyday connections that often made the difference between life and death on the high seas. There were the alliances Jack forged with various pirate crews and captains over the years, each one temporary but significant in its own way. Jack was never above a short-term deal, and he knew that every interaction, whether with an enemy or an ally, had the potential to shift the tide of the battle in his favor. It was in these fleeting moments of camaraderie that Jack's true genius as a pirate came to the fore. He understood the balance of power, and he knew how to turn even the most treacherous pirates into useful pawns. Of course, there were always those who didn't see eye to eye with Jack's more chaotic methods. Some pirates, like the notorious Blackbeard, viewed Jack's easygoing attitude toward leadership as a sign of weakness. Blackbeard believed in power and fear, using intimidation and sheer force to rule over his crew. He saw Jack's pirate brotherhood as little more than a collection of misfit pirates, each doing their own thing. Their uneasy partnership was based more on mutual necessity than any true sense of loyalty, and it wasn't long before Jack found a way to free himself from Blackbeard's iron grip. Despite Blackbeard's brutal nature, Jack did recognize one thing. Pirates like Blackbeard, with their ruthless rule and fearsome reputations, were part of the larger pirate brotherhood. Their connection to Jack was one of shared purpose, even if they were unwilling to admit it. Through all the betrayals, alliances, and rivalries, Jack never lost sight of the one thing that kept his crew together, the shared understanding that they were all pirates. In his eyes, this was the most important bond, the idea that the pirate life was not about ownership, wealth, or power, but about the freedom to choose one's own destiny. His crew was a family of sorts, albeit a dysfunctional one. They weren't always loyal, they didn't always follow orders, and they were certainly prone to infighting. But when the situation demanded it, they always pulled together. One of the most striking examples of this pirate brotherhood came when Jack was faced with a dangerous dilemma, the search for the Fountain of Youth. The quest was treacherous, full of competing interests and high-stakes danger. But it was during this journey that Jack truly saw the value of his crew. They fought for the same goal, and despite their differences, they trusted Jack to guide them through the storm. Even Will Turner, who had once been skeptical of Jack's methods, found himself bound to the pirate's cause, realizing that, much like Jack, he too was searching for something greater than treasure or power. For Will, it was freedom from his father's curse. For Jack, it was freedom from the chains that bound him to the past. In the end, Pirate Brotherhood was never about perfect unity. It was about survival, shared purpose, and the understanding that in the vast, unforgiving ocean, no pirate could thrive alone. Whether Jack Sparrow was leading a crew of misfits or betraying them for his own gain, the essence of Pirate Brotherhood remained the same. It was an unspoken bond, a wild and unpredictable camaraderie that only the high seas could forge. And in this brotherhood, Jack Sparrow was both its most charismatic leader and its most unpredictable rogue. As long as he sailed the seas, Jack knew one thing for certain. The Pirate Brotherhood would continue, forever on the move, forever seeking the next great adventure. Chapter 7. The Fountain of Youth and Beyond. For many pirates, the allure of treasure was the greatest temptation, but for Jack Sparrow, it was always about the thrill of the chase and the freedom that came with it. Yet, even Jack was not immune to the mystique of eternal life. The Fountain of Youth, a legendary and fabled treasure that promised immortality, called to him like a siren's song. It was a treasure that could free him from the confines of time itself, allowing him to sail the seas forever without the fear of growing old or fading into obscurity. But as Jack would soon discover, the pursuit of the fountain was far from simple, and it would lead him into a battle against forces both old and new, testing his wits, his courage, and his very sense of self. Jack first encountered the Fountain of Youth when he crossed paths with Angelica, a woman from his past with whom he shared a complicated history. Angelica, ever the opportunist, was also seeking the fountain, driven by her own desires, partially to undo the mistakes of her past, and partially because the allure of eternal life was too great to ignore. Their reunion was filled with tension and uncertainty, as neither Jack nor Angelica fully trusted each other, yet both recognized that the stakes were high. The fountain was no ordinary treasure. It was guarded by more than just its legends. As Jack embarked on the perilous journey to find the fountain, he soon realized that the quest was more than just a race against time. It was a journey that tested the very nature of his desires. With every step, the lure of immortality grew stronger, but so did the realization that eternal life came with a price. For every promise of power and freedom, there were sacrifices to be made. Jack knew that the pursuit of the fountain wasn't just about treasure, it was about understanding the true cost of what it meant to be free. The search led Jack and his crew to treacherous waters, where they encountered new enemies, including the notorious Blackbeard, whose brutal reputation and thirst for control over the seas made him a formidable adversary. Blackbeard, like Jack, was seeking the fountain for his own purposes, but while Jack desired freedom from the constraints of time, Blackbeard sought the fountain to dominate the world of piracy forever. It was a clash of ideologies, Jack's belief in the unpredictable chaos of freedom versus Blackbeard's desire for absolute power. The quest also brought Jack face to face with a deeper, more personal conflict. The search for immortality forced him to confront his own fears and insecurities, particularly his fear of being forgotten, of fading into the background of history as just another pirate. The fountain promised eternal life, but it also promised an endless cycle, one where time lost its meaning. Was this immortality worth the price of an endless existence, one in which Jack could never truly escape the consequences of his past actions? As the race to the fountain intensified, Jack found himself torn between his own desires and the realization that the pursuit of eternal life could never truly bring the freedom he sought. In the end, the quest for the fountain was not just about finding a magical spring. It was about understanding that true freedom lay not in escaping death, but in accepting life's fleeting nature and living in the moment. When Jack finally reached the fountain, the choice before him was stark. He could drink from its waters and gain eternal life, or he could let it slip away, understanding that his adventures, his life, would be far richer if he embraced its inevitable end. In a moment of unexpected clarity, Jack made the decision to forego immortality. The pursuit of the fountain had been a grand adventure, but Jack knew that there was no treasure greater than the freedom of the open seas, where time itself seemed irrelevant. By choosing not to drink from the fountain, Jack reaffirmed what he had known all along: freedom could never be bought, it had to be lived. The consequences of this decision were immediate. Jack returned to the Black Pearl, having outsmarted Blackbeard and his crew, but also with a renewed understanding of the pirate's life. Immortality, as it turned out, wasn't just about time, it was about the legacy a pirate left behind. And while Jack might never live forever, his story, his legend, would be carried on by the winds of the sea, whispered on every shore. Jack's journey to the Fountain of Youth marked a turning point, not just in his life, but in his understanding of what it meant to be a pirate. The true treasure wasn't gold, jewels, or eternal life, it was the freedom to choose one's destiny, to live without regrets, and to embrace the uncertainty of life on the high seas. And as long as Jack Sparrow sailed, he knew that the real adventure was just beginning. Chapter 8. The End of the Line? The pirate's life was one of constant risk and untold reward, a life where every adventure was a gamble, and every horizon held both promise and peril. For Jack Sparrow, the end of the line was always just another beginning. Yet even the most cunning of pirates must eventually face the inevitable, whether it's the dangers of the sea, the wrath of enemies, or the creeping hand of time. Jack, however, had never been one to bow to fate or succumb to the predictability of life. As long as the wind filled the sails of the Black Pearl, he believed there would always be another adventure, another treasure, another escape. But as the years wore on, Jack found himself at a crossroads, standing on the precipice of what seemed like the end of his story. His past deeds had caught up with him, and enemies, old and new, had begun to close in, each with their own designs on his life, his ship, and his freedom. The East India Trading Company had not forgotten about Jack, and neither had the ghosts of his past. The Black Pearl, though still his loyal vessel, had seen better days, and Jack, despite his ability to charm and deceive, was no longer as invincible as he once believed. The end of the line came in many forms. There were the relentless pursuers, like the ruthless British naval officers who had made it their mission to rid the seas of pirates like Jack. They were relentless, organized, and unfazed by Jack's tricks and misdirection. They represented everything that Jack had spent his life resisting: order, law, and authority. The more they came after him, the more Jack realized that the sea, his eternal home, was no longer as welcoming as it once had been. The tides of piracy were shifting, and Jack could feel it in his bones. There was no escaping the inevitability of change. But perhaps the greatest challenge Jack faced was not from the external world, but from within himself. As the years passed and his adventures piled up, Jack began to question his own motivations. What had he really been searching for all these years? Was it treasure? Freedom? Immortality? Or was it something more elusive, a purpose, a legacy, a way to prove that he had lived a life that mattered? Jack had always prided himself on his unpredictability and his refusal to be tied down, but now he was forced to confront the reality that time was not on his side. The Black Pearl, his ship, his partner in crime, was aging, as was Jack himself. The sea no longer seemed endless, and even Jack's legendary luck appeared to be running out. His final confrontation with the East India Trading Company was inevitable. The company had long been hunting him, seeking to put an end to the pirate threat once and for all. Jack had evaded them for years, using his wit and his charm, but this time, there would be no clever escape. The Black Pearl was caught in a deadly trap, surrounded by naval ships, its crew outnumbered and outgunned. The final battle would be a brutal one that would test Jack's ability to navigate the treacherous waters of diplomacy, deception, and survival. In the midst of this chaos, Jack faced a profound realization. He had spent his life running from responsibility, from his past, from the very idea of settling down. Yet, in this moment of impending doom, he understood that the true test of a pirate was not in how many ships one could sink or treasures one could claim. It was in the legacy one left behind. Jack had lived a life of freedom, yes, but he had also left behind a trail of chaos, betrayal, and broken promises. The end of the line wasn't just about surviving. It was about the choices one made and how those choices defined who they truly were. As the battle raged on, Jack made a choice, perhaps one of the most selfless he had ever made. Instead of continuing the fight for his own survival, he chose to protect those who had stood by him, even when they had no reason to. The Black Pearl was his ship, his pride, but Jack knew that it was time for something new. He had been the captain of his own fate, but he realized that even pirates must sometimes let go. In the final moments of the battle, Jack made a daring escape, using his unmatched skills in navigation and deception. Yet, as he sailed away from the wreckage, there was no sense of triumph. No treasure to claim, no grand victory to celebrate. Just the open sea and the knowledge that the end of the line had arrived, not with a dramatic flourish, but with the quiet acceptance of one man's journey. Jack Sparrow's story was far from over, but in that moment, he understood something that had eluded him for much of his life. The end of the line was not something to fear. It was simply another chapter, one that would lead to new adventures, new horizons, and perhaps a new understanding of what it meant to be free. As the Black Pearl sailed off into the horizon, Jack Sparrow, pirate and legend, knew that while the seas may one day swallow him whole, his story would live on, an unpredictable, chaotic, and everlasting tale of freedom, adventure, and the search for something greater. Chapter 9, A Pirate's Life Forever. The wind still whispered tales of the infamous Captain Jack Sparrow, though they often came in the form of half-forgotten legends, told by those who had heard his name and had the courage, or the misfortune, to cross paths with him. Pirates, it seemed, had a habit of becoming myths long before their final days. Jack Sparrow, however, was different. His story never truly ended. It simply lived on, drifting through the waves, untethered and free, just as he had always lived his life. For Jack, there had never been any grand vision for his legacy. He wasn't concerned with building an empire, securing riches, or becoming a figure of immortal fame. His quest had always been one of freedom, freedom to chart his own course, to bend the rules, to be a pirate in every sense of the word. And though the seas had calmed after his departure, the myth of Jack Sparrow never ceased to grow, carried by the stories of those who had encountered him, as well as the ones who never had but still longed for a glimpse of the legend. While some believed Jack's adventures had come to a final close, there were always whispers, rumors that he hadn't disappeared entirely. That somewhere on a distant shore, perhaps beyond the horizon, the Black Pearl still sailed, its captain as enigmatic as ever, always in search of a new adventure. Perhaps Jack had found a way to escape the clutches of time, or perhaps he had simply sailed into the unknown, leaving behind the chaos of the pirate world to seek a new kind of freedom. In the quietest corners of the sea, where the sun sets and the stars begin their nightly dance, old sailors would occasionally swear they'd seen a ghostly silhouette on the deck of the Black Pearl. Some said Jack had found a hidden island, a paradise beyond the reach of time or the law. Others claimed that he had simply outwitted fate, cheating death one last time. But no one ever truly knew. For Jack Sparrow, as always, had remained a mystery, his life and choices as unpredictable as the sea itself. The truth was, there was no end to the pirate's life, at least not one that could be easily defined. Pirates don't retire. They simply fade into legend, their stories continuing to ripple through the oceans, no matter how far they sail. Jack had understood this long before anyone else. And so, when the world stopped searching for him, Jack embraced it. He was, and would always be, a pirate. No matter what his fate, his spirit would never be tied down. As for those who had crossed paths with him, the brave souls who had sailed alongside or against him, each carried a piece of Jack Sparrow with them. Will Turner and Elizabeth Swan, whose love story intertwined with Jack's, would go on to live their own adventures, but they never forgot the pirate who had changed their lives forever. And even Barbossa, with his complicated history with Jack, couldn't help but respect the legacy the pirate had left behind, a legacy built not on gold, not on power, but on the freedom to choose one's path, no matter the cost. Perhaps the greatest testament to Jack's life, however, was that he had lived on his own terms, defying convention, authority, and even the very forces that sought to control him. The pirate's code was never something Jack followed strictly. His life was about breaking it, bending it, and rewriting it as he saw fit. And in doing so, he had created a life of adventure, chaos, and freedom, one that would be remembered long after the last ship sailed. Jack Sparrow may have sailed off into the great unknown, but in the hearts of those who dared to dream like a pirate, he would never truly be gone. For in every gust of wind, in every crashing wave, there was the echo of a pirate's laugh, the rattle of a compass that always pointed to adventure, and the indelible truth that no matter where life's journey took him, a pirate's life was, indeed, forever. Thanks for watching the video.